it leaves room for a lot of improvisation. And certainly Powder Blues set's always been based on that. And to this day, the soloists don't know who I'm going to point at. And it's sort of fun, like occasionally I'll point at the tenor player and let him play a few choruses, and then I'll turn to the drummer and say, stop playing. And I'll go over and just play one-on-one with the sax player to see what happens. And sometimes it flops and sometimes it's very exciting. So yeah, we're playing a lot of the same tunes, but to me, it's almost like you use the same mantra, but your meditation is always different. It's like standing in front of the magic mountain and saying, open sesame. You try one song, mountain doesn't open. You try another song, bingo. You're in the den of thieves looking at a bunch of riches. That's how I see music.
And you always played with some amazing players.
I always tried to play with guys that were better than me, and that wasn't hard, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I think you sell yourself a little short there.
And that's another thing that's neat. It's like, I go on stage with Bill Runge. Bill's been in a band since 81. That's how long is that? Like 41 years or something? And I've watched him over those 40 years and listened to his solos. I try to listen to every single note. And he has grown so much as a musician. And as he's grown, I've tried to keep up or to stretch, and that stretches me. So maybe they're old friends, but the conversation is always colored with growth, for lack of a better word. And all my guys are like that. I mean, the guys I play with are masters. They play far higher than me, but they always giving me something to aspire to, and that's great. Maybe I kick them around with a little energy,
I always thought that Slow Motion Walter was a good example of what you're talking about. This is Co-op Radio in Vancouver. That's Tom Lavin and the Powdered Blues Band, and a great example of all of the guys coming together. Slow Motion Walter. I seem to recall that you were always one of the hardest working bands in show business. You were always on the road. You played everywhere in BC, every little nook and cranny, every bar, every club, and you went across the country. You played in the U.S. How has that changed?
1981 was the peak of touring. I think if I had to do it again, I would have toured a lot less and spent a lot more time in the studio. But finances being the way they were, we were just driven to do that. And, it was when you're touring like that, you get some bad habits.
Yeah.
It was very hard in terms of drinking and sniffing and all the, having to live in buses and planes. That's tough. I think 1981 was the workingest year, and we did 323 different shows in a calendar year. And that was pretty heavy. I've done so many other things in the intervening years, but I've always kept the band alive. So yeah, we've got a show in May at the Rio for the Co-op Radio benefit, and then we've got 4 shows, high ticket shows at the Blue Frog in June, and then I think we're headlining at Peach Fest in August, and then we're headlining the Trois-Rivières Blues Festival in Quebec late in August. And I mean, there's this and that. I can't think of all the dates. I'm really fortunate because I'm one of those musicians that has done some other things that have created some economic freedom for me. So I do this because I really like it, not because I have to, not because I got to flog a dead horse. So anyone that sees me on stage knows I'm there because I still really get off on this. I love to hang with the guys and play music and see if we can make it happen. It's not the only thing I've done over those intervening years.
So, not wanting to get too personal, but do you mind sharing what you've done?
Well, there was all kinds of things came up. Like I said, my hobby was always reading science and technology. And so for a while in the 80s, I guess, I started consulting to Howe Street for venture capitalists. And so they'd get a white paper on some invention and wanted to know whether there was any validity towards doing a public stock offering and what the chances of success might be. And so I could read those technical papers, and then I guess my only gift was being able to put them into street language that a broker could understand. Brokers at that time, most of their depth was they'd look at your watch, then they'd look at your shoes, and then they'd ask you what kind of car you were driving.
Yeah.
And that's how they made their assessment. So yeah, I did that for a while, and then one day some gal I knew was working, and she said, with this PhD from UBC, and he's got this weird office down on Broadway, and we're doing this thing called Computer Bulletin Board, and it's going crazy, and I think you need some help, and I know you know about technology. Come down and check it out. I didn't know what it was. I think that would have been 96, 97 later on. And it was, of course, it was a Computer Bulletin Board, but he was trying to hook up with a 28K modem to the very beginning of the internet. So I went to one of their staff meetings. It was just crazy. I mean, it's just a room with, he was still being a UBC professor, and he had a little chalkboard and was trying to tell him about fiber optics and this and that and the other. And I just looked at it as business opportunity. I said, this is huge. This is electronic communication and digital and linked with information and advertising. And I said at that meeting, I said, you can't do this by yourself. You need millions of dollars right now. And the only way to do that is to turn this into a public company, which I had never done before. And of course, he didn't want to do that. He wanted to own the internet. And so I did. I just went to some venture capitalists I knew, and I said, we need to start an internet connectivity service, and raised a couple $1 million, and I was CEO of the company, and we went in a year. This was pre me ever having a personal computer.
Wow.
I bought my first laptop after I decided to start an internet company, and we named it Axion Internet, and was sort of neck and neck with us and Internet Direct in the beginning. And I grew that company from me to 50 employees in a period of 14 months or something. And then my I went to the financiers and the investors, and I said, we need to take this onto a bigger exchange and get a lot more money, because it's going to be much cheaper to get subscribers now than it will be in a year, because there'll be a lot more competition. And the more subscribers, the more of an asset you have to be taken over by a bigger corporation for a buyout. And they said to me, and I quote, "The internet was a fad and it's over." And so that day I wrote my resignation letter and I cashed in all my stock, and I started another company, which we took on NASDAQ, which was called Megachain. And what that was we came up with a concept of multi-level marketing in the cloud. So in other words, I send you an email and say, Don, if you use this code, you'll get 50% off on Nike runners. And if you don't want Nike runners, send it to your entire email list. And anyone that buys it with your code, you'll get a piece of the action and I'll get a piece of your action. And it'll go down 10 levels. And so all of a sudden, everybody in the world gets the internet email on Nike runners.
Yeah.
And we actually developed the software to track that all. And then I put that on NASDAQ, and then we took that to the London Exchange in Great Britain and opened up an office there right at the time of the dot-com collapse. So I did an RTO to a biotech company and got all my investors out at a good buck. And at that point, I decided I didn't really like public companies anymore, because I saw the greed factor got to me. And I left public company operation. But I left with some money in hand, which was nice. And then I started Pacific Audiovisual Institute in 2000, which was a school that I wrote 5 one-year programs for, including audio production and engineering and independent filmmaking, and a course in computer animation, graphic design, that sort of thing. And I ran that for 15 years and sold that in 2015. Because I want to spend more time with my kids. But all through those other business ventures, I continued to tour. We were always playing 40, 50 shows a year.
Wow.
So that was fun. I mean, it's just something else to do.
What an exciting journey.
Oh, yeah, it's been neat. It's been very fun. I met a lot of people.
I'm really grateful that you shared that, because it's such a fun journey. Thinking that the iPhone came out in 2008, and you were way out in front of that, at the same time as dial-up.
It was sort of funny, because I was into tennis a lot, and I joined Vancouver Lawn Tennis. And, there was the science of industry there. I'd be in the locker room and say, oh, do you have email? And they go, what's email? And I say, well, do you have a website? And they say, well, what's the website? I remember going to Dairyland or Macmillan Blodell and saying, I like to put you on the web and give you a website. And they didn't know what it was. It was very early years. It moved fast, though, once it did. The minute I saw it, I thought, man, this is Gutenberg on steroids.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
It was.
Yeah, no question. So you've probably been asked this question a dozen times, maybe hundreds of times. What was it like to win a Juno? There's so much said about Canadian music and Canadian content. I'm wondering what that felt like.
Well, like, what was that first one? Best New Band or something?
Yeah.
And that was like, I remember being backstage, and somebody had told, and I'd written a tune called Boppin' with the Blues, which had hit the radio just previous to that Juno. And somebody there, I have no idea who, said, oh, I heard Ronnie Hawkins is going to do a cover version of Boppin' with the Blues. And I knew who Ronnie Hawkins was. He was sort of like a hero to me, right?
Yeah,
And then I looked over, and he was standing in the wings, not very far from me. And I came over to him and I said, oh, Mr. Hawkins, I said, I'm Tom Lavin from Powder Blues, and I wrote Boppin' with the Blues, and somebody just told me that you were going to do a cover version of it. And he said to me, he looked at me and he said, I do them all, son. I do them all. That was a funny way to have your bubble popped.
Yeah.
I know a number of stories about Ronnie firsthand that I can't.
Yeah, I've got a couple. And he is certainly, colorful.
Yeah.